Well, welcome to the world today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. More than 400 people killed following Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Uncertainty clouds Trump's scheduled phone call with his Russian counterpart set to be underway as we speak. Plus, investigations begin into the North Macedonia nightclub disaster. Let's begin the world today. More than 400 people have been killed as Israeli airstrikes barraged on Gaza on Monday night. The Hamas-run health ministry says hundreds more are injured in hospitals. The strikes began overnight, according to the Israeli Defense Forces, which issued new evacuation orders in Gaza this morning. They recently released a statement saying they're continuing to strike targets across the Strip. Now, according to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel would act against Hamas with increasing military strength, accusing it of refusing to release hostages and rejecting proposals to extend the ceasefire. Hamas accuses Israel of attacking defenseless civilians and says mediators should hold Israel fully responsible for violating and overturning the ceasefire. Meanwhile, the calls for return to ceasefire have been mounting, with humanitarian organizations now saying Gazans have endured unimaginable suffering. The families of Israeli hostages being held in Gaza have issued a statement saying the Israeli government chose to give up the hostages with this latest round of strikes. In another development today, after U.S. airstrikes targeted Houthi rebels in Yemen, huge crowds have protested in the rebel-controlled country. Tens of thousands of demonstrators, many waving assault rifles, daggers or Qurans, chanted in protest against America. Local TV also showed clips of large crowds in Sadr, a birthplace of the Iran-backed Houthi movement, and demonstrations in Damar. U.S. President Donald Trump had on Monday explicitly linked the actions of Yemen's Houthi rebels to the group's main benefactor, Iran, warning Tehran would suffer consequences for further attacks by the group. Describing the Houthis as sinister and mobsters and thugs, Trump warned any attack by the group will be met with great force, and there's no guarantee that that force will stop there. Staying with the story, those U.S. airstrikes have reportedly continued a third time on Yemen even today. The Houthis said on Telegram they targeted the USS Harry S. Truman carrier group with missiles and drones, making the attack the third in the past 48 hours in the northern Red Sea. A U.S. defense official said Houthis continue to communicate lies and disinformation, adding the Iran-backed group is well known for false claims, minimizing the results of attacks while exaggerating the successes of theirs. U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Alexis Grinkovich earlier told reporters it was hard to confirm the attacks claimed by the Houthis, as rebels were missing their targets by over 100 miles. Houthi media said fresh U.S. strikes hit Yemen on Monday after tens of thousands demonstrated when waving assault rifles, daggers and Qurans and chanting death to America. Well, U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce says the U.S. strikes on the Houthi rebels sent a powerful and clear message of America's protection for its people and freedom in navigation. She was answering questions at a press briefing. She said the U.S. was only responding to Houthi strikes on American vessels on one of the world's busiest shipping corridors on the Red Sea.
In our fight against terrorists, President Trump ordered the launch of decisive and powerful U.S. military deterrence operations against the Iranian-backed Houthi terrorists in Yemen. Following the strikes, Secretary Rubio noted that the president, quote, sent a powerful and clear message. These attacks on U.S. vessels and global shipping must stop, and we will hold you accountable. We will protect our people and freedom of navigation. In furtherance of President Trump's maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, last week the State Department announced sanctions on Iran's oil minister and shadow fleet that facilitates Iran's illicit crude oil trade. These actions were taken to stop the flow of revenue to the Iranian regime that uses to fuel conflict in the Middle East, advances its nuclear program, and supports its terrorist proxies. What we've seen, of course, in the past when it comes to the Houthis, it was a tit-for-tat strike. If the Houthis would be sending missiles or attacking both commercial and military ships, what the previous administration did is they would do one strike as a tit-for-tat dynamic. What's happening now is a complete shift when it comes to the nature of why it's going on, which is to stop the assault on the maritime traffic in that area. And up to this point, there's about 174 attacks on American naval ships, which is an extraordinary number of attacks. And this isn't a situation that should be managed. It has to stop. So the message to the Houthis is, if this will end when you end the attack on both commercial and military ships in that region. So it's a maritime issue, and it's meant to completely change the posture of the Houthis, and of course, in a conjunction in that dynamic with Iran, that the days of pinprick responses where we allow that to occur is over.
We're still in the Middle East as we see the aftermath of an alleged U.S. airstrike which struck an ironworks area in the Bajil district of Yemen's Al Hudaydah governorate. Firefighters were seen dousing flames inside the factory, while a shell crater and piles of smoldering debris were also seen. There's been no official statement issued by the U.S. regarding the details of these airstrikes at the time of this report. But on Saturday, U.S. Central Command carried out precision strikes described by President Trump as decisive and powerful against Houthi targets to defend American interests and ensure freedom of navigation. Well, back to those Israeli strikes on Gaza overnight. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says Israel will act against Hamas with increase in military strength, accusing Hamas of repeated refusal to release hostages held since October of 2023 and of rejecting proposals to extend the ceasefire. Now, Hamas accuses Israel of attacking defenseless civilians and says mediators should hold Israel fully responsible for violating and overturning the ceasefire. Israel says 59 hostages are still being held in Gaza, with up to 24 believed to be alive. A group representing hostage families accuses the Israeli government of choosing to give up the hostages by launching new airstrikes. In another development, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has hosted Jordan's King Abdullah II in Rome for talks centered on addressing urgent humanitarian needs in Gaza and on strengthening bilateral cooperation. Both leaders were seen early in the day as the Italian Prime Minister welcomed the monarch with a formal Guard of Honor ceremony. Later, the leaders held talks focusing primarily on alleviating the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, praising the ongoing collaboration between Italy and Jordan in delivering aid to the region. During the talks, they also reiterated calls for an immediate ceasefire in Syria and endorsed an inclusive political transition involving all societal factions. Discussions also addressed opportunities for improving partnership between Jordan and Italy. All eyes have been on the proposed phone talks between the U.S. President Donald Trump and Russia's President Vladimir Putin, which almost didn't happen today. The timing of President Putin's appearance at the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs meeting in Moscow was scheduled at the same time he's supposed to be speaking with the U.S. President. The much-awaited phone call was supposed to take place between 1 and 3 p.m., according to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Dmitry Peskov. But at 1:52, Russian state news agency TASS said President Putin left the venue. And in the past, Putin has on numerous occasions been late to key meetings, such as his own press conferences, and made others wait. But last Thursday, U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff reportedly arrived in Moscow shortly after noon, a local time, but was only able to meet Putin late in the evening. We're also learning the phone call between the two leaders is underway, and it's going well, according to the White House. It marks the second known time the two leaders have spoken since Trump returned to office in January. The U.S. president has said that the plan to discuss land, power plants, and dividing up certain assets will be top on the agenda. We're off on a short break now on The World Today. When we come back, more on the phone talks going on between the U.S. president and the Russian President Vladimir Putin on peace in Ukraine. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. Well, all eyes still on those talks between the U.S. President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, set to be underway still as we speak, according to the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Dan Scavino. The calls are still in progress. There's still no further updates on what has been talked about so far, but Scavino suggests the two leaders have been on the call for at least 90 minutes. Now, once it concludes, there'll likely be a readout on the call, although those details are usually short and do not provide many details. In the meantime, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Finland for talks on military assistance. He posted on Telegram saying he'll be meeting with his Finnish counterpart Alexander Stubb in the country's Prime Minister, Petteri Orpo, and defense industry representatives. The Finnish presidency confirmed that talks will be held at the presidential palace on Wednesday. They'll be focusing on defense support, investment in weapons production in Ukraine, and Ukraine's European integration. In the meantime, back to those talks holding between President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin says it is a positive and constructive conversation after the two leaders agreed to begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. We're giving you updates on that story as it develops. Now, before the talks today, the U.S. president had a number of issues to clear up. He did so in front of journalists.
Well, we have tremendous things to report tomorrow. I'm speaking with President Putin of Russia to save some soldiers who are in deep trouble. They're captured. Essentially, they're surrounded by Russian soldiers. So I give you a lot of different things in one news conference, but it's a big deal. They're surrounded by Russian soldiers, and I believe if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't be here any longer. I was able to get them not to do anything at this moment, but it's a bad situation in Russia, and it's a bad situation in Ukraine. What's happening in Ukraine is not good, but we're going to see if we can work a peace agreement, a ceasefire and peace, and I think we'll be able to do it. I'm speaking to President Putin tomorrow morning, yes. The only reason I'm involved, and this is Russia and Ukraine, but a lot of people, it's humanity. I'm involved for humanity. A lot of people are being killed over there, and we had to get Ukraine to do the right thing. It was not an easy situation. You got to see a little glimpse at the Oval Office. But I think they're doing the right thing right now, and we're trying to get a peace agreement done. We want to get a ceasefire and then a peace agreement. This was Joe Biden's deal. This isn't Trump's deal. This is Joe Biden's deal. He gave $350 billion to Ukraine, and he shouldn't have done it. It wasn't secured. Europe gave $100 billion, and it was in the form of a loan. They get their money back. And they should actually have much more in it than us. But Joe Biden was grossly incompetent, and it's a shame what they did. $350 billion. We could have rebuilt our entire Navy for that kind of money.
U.S. President Donald Trump, now at the White House on Monday, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt gave updates on what today's phone call will be about.
As for Russia, as you know, the president announced last night on Air Force One on his return from his very busy weekend in Florida that he will be speaking to President Putin tomorrow. I won't get ahead of those negotiations, but I can say we are on the 10th yard line of peace, and we've never been closer to a peace deal than we are in this moment. And the president, as you know, is determined to get one done.
While world leaders are keenly monitoring the progress of the talks between Trump and Putin, Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó hopes that both leaders will come to an agreement about how to normalize U.S.-Russia relations. He was speaking to reporters on the issue earlier today, saying, "We have an experience of history in the central part of Europe, namely that the better the relationship between the U.S. and Russia is, the better for us. Whenever the U.S. and Russia had a bad relationship, it was bad to us as well. But whenever they had a good relationship, our situation was much better and our region was much safer." So what we hope for? What we do hope for is that President Trump and President Putin can make an agreement about how to normalize U.S.-Russia relations and how to make peace in Ukraine. You know, we've been living now for 3 years in the shadow of the war, and that's enough, more than enough. And we hope that they can make an agreement on how to make peace, and peace can return to Central Europe finally. Adding his voice to the matter, Slovak Foreign Minister Juraj Blana said Bratislava supports U.S. President Donald Trump's peace initiative and has been vocally calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine since the beginning of the conflict. While speaking with Russian media earlier today, according to Blana, other European nations stand at odds with his country's approach to the settlement of the conflict. The Slovak diplomat also emphasized the importance of the Global South's participation in the negotiation process, saying developing countries should be part of security guarantees. Dialogue between Moscow and Washington resumed last month after a landmark call between President Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, with 2 rounds of peace talks taking place.
We were very clear since the beginning of this invasion that there is no any military solution. So we really support this initiative of new President Mr. Trump. And I'm really expecting the constructive dialogue, which will proceed the discussion about the ceasefire, which was provided from the Jeddah dialogue between the U.S. and Ukraine side, and also continuing into a peace negotiation. That's the only way how we can solve this the conflict. I can't say that Europe is differently, but there are some countries which have a different approach as we have, because they are convinced that the shipping and other weapons to this conflict will solve the problem. This peace negotiation should have also some security guarantee, you know, and I think the countries of Global South should be one part of these security guarantees, because as you know, many countries like China, Brazil also introduce some peace proposal, and they want to be involved in this, and I think this could be some way how to come together and to start let's say respect the international law. Because what we are witnessing right now is just erosion of international and humanitarian law. So we have to come back, and all the stakeholders like India and China and Brazil, Global South, and also European Union and countries of European Union should be around the table and securing this peace for the future.
I want to bring in now international affairs analyst Dr. Adi Omale. He joins us from the nation's capital, Abuja. Dr. Omale, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Good evening, and I'm pleased to be on Channels Television.
As always, we appreciate your analysis on the program. Today, we're looking forward to readouts of that conversation between the U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. No details yet have emerged as to what has been said, although we're reading that they've been speaking for about 90 minutes now. What do you think has gone on within that period of time between the two?
Well, I think it's a good omen that finally we are back to the negotiation table. The two leaders are using their personal diplomacy skills to ensure that by the time they speak to each other, we are very positive that certain developments will be arrived at that may lead to the ceasefire. I know that Russia has their reservation of the ceasefire, so also Ukraine. But I think with Donald Trump's being eager to bring out a ceasefire, that is a very good development. And I think both Ukraine and Russia should cooperate with the U.S. president to ensure that the ceasefire is achieved. The whole world is waiting eagerly to get the results of the phone conversation between the two powerful leaders of the world. And I think that the key issues that are going to be discussed, though they are still shrouded in secrecy, at the end of the day, I am very positive that some headway will be made and ceasefire restored.
Well, that is everybody's hope, but we know it's not going to be that easy because the Russian president did lay out a number of conditions for this ceasefire and peace to be in existence between Russia and Ukraine. And one of them is for Ukraine never to join NATO, never to attempt joining NATO. Ukraine must remain a neutral state even after this war. What do you make of that? I mean, I know that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky really wanted to bring Ukraine out of Russia's shadow, but even that is hurting him now.
Well, according to Zelensky, the conditions that are being given by the Russian President Putin, there are conditions that to him are not achievable. So for Putin to say that Ukraine, that is a sovereign country, should not have the right to join any international organization it so wishes, that will not be fair to Ukraine. I have consistently said that Russia should tone down its opposition to Ukraine joining NATO. And my premise of holding that view is because many of the neighbors of Russia are already members of NATO. Georgia is a member of NATO. Armenia is a member of NATO, and several other countries that have shared boundaries with Russia. So why is Ukraine all very different? And so to that extent, I don't think that condition as set out by Putin is something that is worth talking about. Moreover, I don't think the world has transcended beyond once you have somebody as your neighbor, you think that you are secure. No, somebody can stay 1,000 miles off and still attack you. Gone are the days that in these days of hypersonic missiles, you must not necessarily have boundary with somebody before you can attack that person. So I do not think that stopping Ukraine from joining NATO should be a rigid condition that Russia will hold on to. Secondly, I still believe that Putin will understand that the international system, we are now in a globalized world, and Ukraine, being a sovereign country, can decide to form alliance or join any other country, irrespective of how Moscow feels. So that is my view on that matter, and I sincerely believe that Russia should be able to tone down so that most of these bloodshed can be avoided. Some other conditions that is given, yes, I agree that since the Cox region was taken over by Ukraine, I believe that it's a Russian territory, so it should go back to Russia. At the same time, Russia should also consider leaving Crimea and other Ukrainian areas that they have annexed, so that it will be a give and take negotiation at the end of the day. Issues of land, issues of assets, issues of power plant, and so on are some of the things that are going to be discussed with the conversation with Putin. And I believe that at the end of the day, a headway will be made. On the issue of power plant, I want to say that since 2022, the Zaporizhzhia power plant or whatever that have been taken over by the Russians will have to be considered back to the Ukrainians so that they can benefit from the power. The Russian forces have been occupying that plant now for close to 2 years, and I think it will be in the interest of Ukraine for Russia to vacate that power plant. So I think it's a good thing. It is better to Georgia than to war. And I think this also brings to the fore the maxim that all wars at the end of the day end on the negotiation table. At the end of the day, every war, no matter how militarily equipped you are, at the end of the day, it is negotiations of this nature, as we are witnessing between the parties involved and the intervention of the United States, that can lead to peace.
Yes, but I know someone is wondering why Ukraine has to give up so much for peace between it and Russia. They're going to lose territories. I mean, those four regions that were annexed by Russia more than a year ago, Donetsk, Luhansk, and two other areas in northern Ukraine have already been annexed by Russia. You already have citizens there who already pledge allegiance to Russia. And then there's also, of course, Ukraine giving up its ability to and right to join any international organization. Then we're also talking power plants and so on. It does seem that at the end of this, Ukraine would be much of the loser. But why does that have to be so with Russia, which is already a really big country with so much power, militarily, economically, and every otherwise? Why would Ukraine have to suffer at the end of the day?
Well, it is a tyranny of the oppressors. I am surprised that under Biden, America did not tolerate what Russia is doing in Ukraine in any form. And that you could see the type of support that the Americans under Biden gave to Zelensky and Ukraine. Also, I must commend the European Union and other countries that have supported Ukraine in this war. You know that militarily, if you compare Ukraine and Russia, definitely Ukraine is the underdog. So that Ukraine has held on for 3 years is a surprise to a lot of analysts. However, as you mentioned, certain lands, certain areas have been forcibly taken over by the bully superpower, Russia. And in this negotiation, I would have loved, at the end of the day, where Russia will pull back and will return to the pre-2022 boundary of Ukraine and pre-2022 boundary between Russia and Ukraine. To me, that would be a fair deal. But insisting that Ukraine will lose Kharkiv, will lose most of the areas of Donbass, and lose, and also in addition to Crimea that it lost in 2014, will not be a fair deal as far as I'm concerned. And if that happens, it underscores the fact that Ukraine's sovereignty has been severely breached, and it would have gone against several United Nations resolutions that have been passed. But if that will bring lasting peace, so be it. but Ukraine at the end of the day would have been at the receiving end, which to me would not be very fair. In this negotiation, what I want to see happen, or what I feel should happen, is that America should insist on the pre-2022 boundaries of both countries while they discuss other issues. While Zelensky has been insisting that they should go back to the 2024 boundary, with Crimea being part of Ukraine. But as it is now, with the negotiation going on now, he seems to be negotiating from a very, very weak position because of the military incursion by the Russians. But again, you cannot, in international politics, just like football, you cannot say it is over until it is over. With the last few days ago, Ukraine was able to carry out drone strike right into the heart of Moscow. So we cannot sit down now and reach a conclusion. Both parties are trying to negotiate from the position of strength, and they are working very hard, either on the battlefield and also militarily, to ensure that by the time they come to the negotiation table, they can negotiate from the position of strength. Trump alluded to Zelensky some few weeks ago that he was negotiating from a position of weakness, but it can be seen that all is not over for Ukraine, with the massive support it is enjoying from across the world, from the European countries like Britain, France, Poland, and so on, and even from Asian countries like Saudi Arabia. It is clear that the world is watching with keen interest on what is happening between Ukraine and Russia. So at the end of the day, I am very confident that there will be a middle-of-the-road approach. Ukraine definitely cannot lose the entire of those territories that we have mentioned. Yes, it might lose some, maybe very small or very few, just to save the face of Putin, who has embarked on a so-called military adventure that he never knew would have taken a toll, this type of toll, on the Russian economy and on the Russian military. So I think that the Americans will also want to see that certain concessions are made to Putin, so that at least to save his face.
Right.
If not, I think this is a disaster for Russia.
Yes, but I'm also thinking, and I'm wondering if this is what, it looks like to you. It appears that the Russian president does have, his own position changing on the West's power over the rest of the world. Somehow he feels that it does supersede that Western dominance. And I'm saying this because the Russian president addressed Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs earlier today, where he was, and people were speculating he might not make the call with U.S. President Donald Trump. He spoke about Western dominance slipping away and new centers of global growth emerging. And it says this is a long-term trend. He was dismissive of the G7 group. He said, why is it so big? No matter where you look on the map, you can see it. He accused the West of putting undue and unfair pressure on Russia, particularly by imposing sanctions. According to him, even if the other side makes a gesture of some sort, lifting or relaxing something, you can expect them to find another way of putting pressure or putting a spoke in our wheel. Do you think that the Russian president thinks, this war has also changed the direction, of world dominance, where he sees Western dominance diminishing, Western dominion diminishing, and then he becoming the superpower that the U.S. is gradually trying to become, I guess, under Trump at the moment?
Well, my take on your question is that this Ukrainian conflict has thrown Russia back into reckoning in international politics. Hitherto, Russia was not reckoned with after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the breakaway of several countries from the old Soviet Union. But Putin has been able to galvanize Russia to have a voice. As a permanent member of the Security Council, he has been able to galvanize Russia, to put them on the map, and to also to become relevant within the international system. And that is why it is instructive that with the approach of Donald Trump, it has further given Russia the confidence that it can be a major player within the international system going forward. So certainly, the unipolar status of the world is becoming to tilt a little bit. Don't forget that the influence of China in tandem with Russia and some other countries has already formed the BRICS countries, which has made a major challenge to Western domination of world affairs. However, the BRICS, it will take a BRICS a long time to be able to catch up. However, with this newfound romance between the US and Russia, it needs to be seen what one can make of how China should be feeling at this point in time. Whether this new romance between Russia and US will isolate China from Russia is something that we are going to be looking at in the years to come. But definitely, the international politics is all about alliances and shifting of alliances and so on. So it is not today, right from the First World War, Second World War, there have always been shifts in alliances. So it is good for the international system. Trump has been able to look at areas where the Americans have been coming very weak, and he's trying to assert America's influence in other ways. Whether he is right or not, the time will tell whether he is right or not. But a lot of Western scholars believe that Trump is trusting Russia too quickly. Trump is trusting that he can do a deal with Putin and with Russia too quickly. He needs to tread with caution. Don't forget that Russia has been a major ally of Iran and China and several other groupings that have been anti-US and the Western world. And so Trump needs to dine with a long spoon with Putin. And with what is happening in Ukraine now and the position Trump is pushing, if he had not stepped back in the last few weeks to begin to look at the issues from the advice that a lot of people are giving, his initial brash approach of intimidating Ukraine and wholesale supporting Putin to take over and annex Ukraine would have been a disaster for American foreign policy. But I'm happy that he's retracing his step and he's saying that what everybody is saying about putting too much trust and confidence in Putin will be counterproductive to the Americans. So, in the nutshell, America definitely, with what is happening, is taking the lead in terms of restoring peace to the world. But again, America is also trying to promote the influence of a competitor. And that is where the worry is coming from. After Ukraine, what next? Will Putin put his eyes on annexing other neighbors, or will he put his eyes on supporting other anti-American and anti-Western interests? So it's time that will tell. But I am also of the view that Putin must be looked at with a lot of suspicion. Putin must not be trusted, and he has to be looked up with a lot of suspicion.
I know that there are a lot of countries that are taking their cues from what's going on. This meeting, this phone call between Donald Trump and President Putin will determine the course of international politics, probably change a number of things, how nations see weaker nations. But there are some who are also hoping that, the U.S. and the Russian president get along for the benefit of the rest of the world. They feel countries like Hungary, beg your pardon, the foreign minister saying that he hopes that both leaders could come to an agreement about normalizing U.S.-Russia relations. They said for the past 3 years they hadn't had, they'd been walking on eggshells around Russia and around peace on the continent. They're hoping that, when the U.S. and Russia do mend their relationship, then there could be peace on the continent. But do you agree with Donald Trump that Joe Biden threw away $350 billion at Ukraine and achieved nothing? Because that's something he's riding on and saying, he could fix that, he could do better than the previous government.
I don't agree with Trump on that. If Biden had not taken the decisions he took as at that time to provide military support, to provide financial support to Ukraine, Russia would have easily overrun Ukraine, and we will not be where we are today. So I must give kudos to Biden and to the rest of the European countries for the initial pressure on Russia so that Russia wouldn't have annexed Ukraine in an easy way, the way it went at that time. So I disagree totally with Trump. $60 billion was well spent and it was worthwhile, and it has taught Russia a lesson, and not just Russia, to others who might also have expansionist tendencies, that the world cannot sit down and watch people violate the sovereignty, territorial sovereignty of nations the way Putin did brazenly. I am sure deep down in Putin's mind, he would have regretted trying to annex Ukraine the way he did. If he knew that the war was going to last this long, I doubt if he would have embarked on such ending. His intelligence probably failed him by not adequately telling him that, by not looking at the support that Ukraine was able to gather from across the globe. And so, to me, I must give kudos to Biden, and I must give kudos to the European Union and other countries that have supported Ukraine. One thing that is very clear is that Ukraine is an independent country that deserves to exist, and there's no reason under the sun why Russia should take it upon itself to annex Ukraine. And I must also commend the boldness and the doggedness in which the Ukrainians have resisted this adventure by Putin and his army. I don't even want to go to the level of involvement of North Korea and some other rogue states, as they are called, in the conflict. But that is why the Americans must be cautious in this conflict, because with the involvement of North Korea and some of these states that tilts towards dictatorship, it is very worrisome, very, very, very worrisome. And the democratic world must take note of what is really happening. And Trump, and that is why I was sounding a note of warning earlier on, that Trump must be very, very cautious. If you are dining with the devil, you have to dine with the long spoon.
Mm-hmm. I hope he's listening. I hope he has the right people around him, giving him the advice that he needs to chart this relationship with the Russian president. Dr. Doyomale, thank you so much for this extensive analysis on the situation between Russia and Ukraine.
Thank you, Amarachi, and thanks for having me. I appreciate you. I appreciate Channels Television.
You're welcome. We're off on another break now on The World Today. Still ahead. Welcome back. Germany is expected to pass a major spending bill on defense and infrastructure today, allowing the country to unleash hundreds of billions of euros into the economy. Both the euro and German stocks may maintain their uptrend amid optimism about the fiscal reform. The German stock market and the euro continue to rise ahead of today's parliamentary vote on a major spending bill. Proposal initiated by Germany's Chancellor-in-Waiting Friedrich Merz will allow Germany to spend beyond 1% of gross domestic product, that's all roughly 45 billion euros for defense. The bill's passage will also enable the government to create a special fund of up to 500 billion euros for infrastructure development. Last Friday, Merz reached an agreement with the Green Party on the debt-funded spending package, clearing a key hurdle for the final parliamentary votes to three parties, including Merz-led CDU, CSU, the SPD and the Greens, hold 520 seats in the Bundestag lower house, more than enough to make the two-thirds majority to amend the constitutional law. Interestingly, Chinese state media has welcomed Donald Trump's move to cut public funding for news outlets, Voice of America and Radio Free Asia, which have long reported authoritarian regimes. That decision affects thousands of employees around the world. Some 1,300 staff have been put on paid leave at the Voice of America alone since Friday's executive orders. Critics say the move is a setback for democracy, but Beijing's state newspaper Global Times denounced the VOA for what it said was its appalling track record in reporting China, and said it has now been discarded by its own government. The White House has defended the move, saying it will ensure that taxpayers are no longer on the hook for radical propaganda. Meanwhile, the WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says the U.S. administration has been extremely generous over many years, and it's within its rights to decide what it supports and to what extent. But according to him, the U.S. also has the responsibility to ensure that if it does withdraw direct funding for countries, it is done in an orderly and humane way.
The U.S. administration has been extremely generous over many years. And of course, it's within its rights to decide what it supports and to what extent. But the US also has a responsibility to ensure that if it withdraws direct funding for countries, it's done in an orderly and humane way that allows them to find alternative sources of funding. We ask the US to reconsider its support for global health, which not only saves lives around the world, it also makes the US safer by preventing outbreaks from spreading internationally. And because health is wealth, fighting disease around the world supports global economic growth and stability, which benefits the US. If the US decides not to restore direct funding to countries, we ask it to engage in dialogue with affected countries so plans can be made to transition from reliance on US funding to more sustainable solutions without disruptions that cost lives. Whether or not US funding returns, other donors will need to step up. But so too must countries that have relied on US financing to the extent they can.
The North Macedonian Interior Ministry says more than 20 people now face investigation after a fire that swept through a nightclub, killing dozens of people. The death toll stands at 59 as a result of the blaze that started when staged pyrotechnics set fire to a patch of ceiling at a club that prosecutors say was in breach of several fire regulations. State prosecutor Korchevsky says a preliminary inspection of the nightclub in the northern town of Kokani had revealed a succession of safety code violations. He said it did not have two exit doors, but only one single improvised metal door at the back of the building, which was locked and without a handle inside. He says there was said to be an insufficient number of fire extinguishers and insufficient emergency vehicle access. The blaze caused the roof of the single-story building, a former carpet warehouse, to partially collapse. A massive fire that erupted Sunday afternoon at a landfill operated by the Authority for the Sustainable Management of Lake Amatialan Basin in Villanueva City, south of the Guatemalan capital, has engulfed vast quantities of waste and is now spewing fumes into the air. This video was captured on Monday, showing firefighters battling the blaze with water tankers, dousing towering mounds of smoldering refuse. Authorities report the fire has now been 50% contained and 35% was extinguished by Monday evening. Citing air pollution, Guatemala's Ministry of Education suspended classes on Monday for all public and private schools in affected areas. Governor Mauricio Bernardo says a fire may have been triggered by methane gas buildup, a common risk in landfills plagued by inadequate waste management. Despite the ongoing crisis, government officials claim air quality levels have remained acceptable, though they acknowledge a moderate health risk for vulnerable groups. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams have left the International Space Station. This morning they did, in a SpaceX capsule for a long-awaited trip back to Earth, 9 months after their faulty Boeing opened new task Starliner craft upended what was to be a roughly week-long test mission. Wilmore and Williams, two veteran NASA astronauts and retired U.S. Navy test pilots, strapped inside their Crew Dragon spacecraft, along with two other astronauts, and undocked from the orbiting laboratory at around 1:05 a.m. Eastern Time, embarking on a 17-hour trip to Earth. The four-person crew, formerly part of NASA's Crew 9 astronaut rotation mission, is scheduled for a splashdown off Florida's coast later today. Crew 9 is going home, said Commander Nick Hague from inside the capsule, as it slowly backed up and away from the station for what a NASA official described on the live webcast of the event as the trip downhill. He said it was a privilege to call the station home as part of an international effort for the benefit of humanity. As we end the world today, Dubai's Expo City has launched its third High Ramadan, also known as Ramadan neighborhood, an exhibition enticing dozens of residents to immerse themselves in the spirit of the holy month with cultural booths and theatrical performances. This video of visitors on Saturday shows them exploring booths at the exhibition, which can be seen full of vibrant Emirati and Islamic themed decorations. We also see attendees watching an artistic theatrical performance of the story of Prophet Yunus. The exhibition offers visitors traditional dining experiences where they can witness the iconic iftar canon, signaling the time for Muslims to break their fast. That's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.